Good morning. One of the individuals who commented on some of my work here on these YouTubes said, for example, answer this. Israel could never have been that populated, and they never could have crossed the Red Sea, and on and on and on. Let me know about that. And so I did a huge study on this and went into details. Let's just see how far we can get without getting into too much detail. Then you can go back and look at it. Let's go here. Take a look at this address. In Acts chapter 7, we have a dissertation to the Jews about their history. So I decided to take a look at that and prove it out point for point. So, in answer to the question, which my commentator said, pretty much the same. Skeptics insist there are too many to cross the Red Sea, or not enough, or the Red Sea didn't make any sense, never happened, it's just a figment of the imagination, and the Bible's inconsistent. So, let's answer it this way with what I've written already. Objectors insist that a large group of people could not have successfully crossed the Red Sea, especially with the Egyptians in pursuit. Well, you get the wrong destination and wrong information besides, and you won't get a good answer. But the Israelites crossed over the Red Sea at the Gulf of Aqaba. The reason for that is that's the Arabian side. It branched out. The proper name translated Red Sea in Exodus in most Bible translations is translated Yam Sup. In the Hebrew Bible, sea, Yam means sea, and sup is a noun which is a general term for marine plants. So it can be designated freshwater, bulrushes, or something like that. So that's the name of that Red Sea. Now it talks about in Exodus, if you read the Bible properly, and it has not changed since the original text. There have been some variations and some attempts to change it, but we can have enough manuscript evidence to see what it actually said. Exodus of the children of Israel from Egypt in these passages, which are here. And the Hebrew name Yap is always translated Red Sea, which is the name given to it by the Greeks in the Septuagint. So the origin of this name is uncertain, but it can be pretty much established that that's the body of water that they passed. People say, well, there's a different water, different places. The events following Moses' flight from Egypt into Midian, a land east of the Gulf of Aqaba, provided a clue as to the location of Mount Sinai as to where the children of Israel traveled after leaving Egypt. Where was the Mount Sinai? Yes. During the 40 years Moses was in Midian, he tended the sheep of his father-in-law, Jethro, and so on. And let's see, if we can look down for some more significant information. I go into some great detail to verify as much as I can. The traditional Mount Sinai is over 300 miles by land from Jethro's home in a region where there is very little water or pasture. Also, to make an Arabic location of Sinai more certain, we're looking at Mount Sinai in Arabia. The Bible specifically says that Horeb, where Moses had the experience of the burning bush, is in Midian. Of course, if Sinai is in Arabia, that location offers many more choices for crossing the Red Sea than a location for Mount Sinai at St. Catherine's for the Red Sea in the Gulf of Aqaba. There's the border between Egypt and Arabia for hundreds of miles. Besides specifying that Sinai is in Midian, which is what was Arabia during the time of Paul, the Bible gives many indications that Israel crossed the Red Sea at the Gulf of Aqaba, not Lake Sirbonis or Bitter Lakes or North Suez, as some contend. These latter sites are too far north and do not provide any reason why Israel should have been trapped there, and do not account for the elapsed time of about 25 days from leaving Egypt to the Red Sea and crossing at Pi Hahiroth. See, so we put some of the facts together and we find out where they actually crossed. Then look at the feasibility. I give you the accounting of the days as follows, to get up to 25 days. Now, the New Testament makes explicit what the Old Testament implies. Paul says that Mount Sinai is in Arabia. That's Galatians 4:25. And Israel had to cross the Red Sea somewhere at the Gulf of Aqaba in order to stay out of the Promised Land and to get to Arabia. One feasible location for the 2 million plus Israelites' successful crossing of the Red Sea is along the western shore of the Gulf of Aqaba, the Nuweiba Peninsula in Egypt. It is a sandy beach in Egypt, 4.25 miles long and 2 miles wide, which could accommodate several million people and their flocks and herds. Now, it can be located on a map by starting at the northernmost tip of the Gulf of Aqaba on the Egyptian side and then going about 50 miles south. I'll give you a map here in a second. It is the site that best matches the Berean Bible account. Note that Gulf of Aqaba was called the Red Sea in ancient times. There's a video you can click on over here, and it'll give you some details. And here's the map. I don't know if you can read this in white. But here we have Succoth, Etham, and all the way down to Nuweiba Beach. And then here's the crossing site where in the water, scuba divers found chariot wheels and horse parts and so on at the bottom. It's not too deep, it's shallow. And then we go to Midian. And then there's Mount Sinai in Arabia. So, we have the encampment at Succoth in the northern end of what is today called the Gulf of Suez. The other side, where people say that's where they crossed the Red Sea. No, that's not the case. Whereupon they traveled through the wilderness to the Red Sea, through the wilderness, through what is today called the Sinai Peninsula. That's the wilderness. The final part of the journey was evidently through a mountainous region called the Wadi Watir Canyon Trail, where it terminated at the Gulf of Aqaba and Nuweiba Beach. The Israelites would have been traveling from Succoth to Pi Hahiroth at the Red Sea along this natural road, a portion of which was frequently used as a trade route before the caravans turned northward toward Canaan, whereupon the Israelites went southward through a mountain gorge to the sea.
Attention, library patrons.
All right, we got an interruption here, so let me start over. Commentator spoke about what about the Red Sea? Really didn't happen, and gave all kinds of information. So in Acts chapter 7, take a look at this address. Copy it down. The purpose of the observation stage is to maintain focus on the text at hand with the normative rules of language, context, and logic. Okay, that's how we do these studies. We go all the way down to the study where the point made, skeptics insist too many to cross the Red Sea. Objectors insist that a large group of people could not have successfully crossed the Red Sea, especially with the Egyptians in pursuit. Well, we look at this. Let's find the location where they may have crossed more likely. All right, the origin of the name Red Sea. We have the events following Moses' flight from Egypt into Midian, a land east of the Gulf of Aqaba. Provides a clue as to the location of Mount Sinai, to where the children of Israel traveled after leaving Egypt. They crossed over and went to Mount Sinai. During the 40 years Moses was in Midian, he tended sheep of his father-in-law, Jethro. And while he was tending sheep, he had the experience with a bush that would not burn out. And when Moses turned aside for a closer look at the strange event, God spoke to him out of the bush and made him a promise. I will certainly be with you. And this will be a sign to you that I have sent you when you have brought the people out of Egypt. And you shall serve the God on this mountain. The mountain where Moses saw the burning bush presumably was in the region where Jethro lived, since Moses was pasturing Jethro's flocks there. The traditional Mount Sinai is over 300 miles by land from Jethro's home in a region where there is very little water or pasture. So this is unlikely. Also, to make an Arabic location of Sinai more certain, the Bible specifically says that Mount Mount Sinai in Deuteronomy 4:10, where Moses had the experience of the burning bushes in Midian. Of course, if Sinai is in Arabia, That location offers many more choices for crossing the Red Sea than a location for Mount Sinai at St. Catherine's or for the Red Sea of the Gulf of Aqaba, which is the border between Egypt and Arabia for hundreds of miles. So there are many indications that Israel crossed the Red Sea at the Gulf of Aqaba, not the Lake of Sirbonis or Bitter Lakes or North Suez, as many contain. These sites are too far north, do not provide any reason why Israel should have been trapped there, and do not take into account the elapsed time of about 25 days from leaving Egypt to the Red Sea, crossing it at the proposed spot, which seems most likely, Pi Hahiroth. So the children of Israel left Egypt on the 15th of the first month. When they crossed the Red Sea, they went 3 days in the wilderness of Shur, then Marah for about a day, then Elim for about a day, and it adds up, as you keep reading, to about 25 days. Net total of 25 days. Now, you go to the New Testament, Paul says that Mount Sinai is in Arabia, Galatians 4:25. And Israel had to cross the Red Sea somewhere at the Gulf of Aqaba in order to stay out of the Promised Land and get to Arabia. One feasible location for the 2 million plus Israelites successful crossing of the Red Sea is along the western side of the Gulf of Aqaba, the Nuweiba Peninsula in Egypt. It's a sandy beach, Egypt, 4.25 miles long, about 2 miles wide, which could accommodate several million people in their flocks and herds. It can be located on a map by starting at the northernmost tip of the Gulf of Aqaba on the Egyptian side. Here's the map. And then going about 50 miles south. All right, all the way down there, it's 50 miles south, crossing at this site where they found chariot wheels and bones, horses' bones, and human bones at Pi Hahiroth. It's a shallow area and a large beach, ideal for that location. Now you can go to a video here and take a look at that. Describes this. I don't know if you can read the map here. It's white against a multicolored background. Mount Sinai in Arabia. It's right about here. And they crossed here. So they had a way to go to Midian. That's where Moses was years before with his Jethro, his father, tending the herds. So, we're going through, having departed Ramses, the children of Israel arrived at their first encampment at Succoth, at the northern end of what is today called the Gulf of Suez, right there. Whereupon they traveled through the wilderness, all the way through this wilderness, to the Red Sea, to what is today called the Sinai Peninsula. It wasn't there at Mount Sinai. The final part of the journey was evidently through a mountainous region called Wadi Watir Canyon Trail, where it terminated at the Gulf of Aqaba at Nuweiba Beach. The Israelites would have been traveling from Succoth to Pi Hahiroth in the Red Sea along the natural road, a portion of which was frequently used as a trade route before the caravans turned northward toward Canaan. Whereupon the Israelites went southward through a mountain range gorged to the sea. We'll see a picture of that in blow-up. Once on this last leg of their sojourn to the Red Sea, retreat was impossible. So they had to press on with their great numbers of flocks, people, and herds right to the edge of the sea on that beach. The Israelites' journey through the mountainous terrain as described in Scripture, Exodus 14:1-4, does not coincide with what some contend was a journey down the eastern shore of the western branch of the Red Sea to the Straits of Tiran, today called the Gulf of Suez, along a continuous coastal plain with sandy beaches, but there's no barrier that they couldn't get over, like some mountainous, which is at Pi Hahiroth. But the location on the opposite side of the Red Sea, to which the children of Israel crossed, is stipulated in Scripture as Baal Zephon, which is the name of the supreme god of the Canaanites, a location likely to be closer to the land of Canaan than so far near the headwaters of the Gulf of Suez at the Straits of Tiran. Canaan is located far to the northeast in the Promised Land, Israel's final destination. In Antiquities, Josephus wrote, confirming that the route was mountainous. Now when the Egyptians had overtaken the Hebrews, they prepared to fight them, And by their multitude, they drove them into a narrow place, not a flat out beach.